Nikon D500. This beast is basically sports photographer catnip, firing off 10 shots per second and tracking anything faster than a toddler after cake. The autofocus is so sticky, it could probably keep up with cheetahs on roller skates, while its deep buffer laughs at anyone worried about missing the winning touchdown. It's chunky and a little old school, but for nailing that blur-free action, I say this thing is a slam dunk. 9 out of 10. Fujifilm X-T32. The Fujifilm X-T32 claims it can shoot sports, and sure, it's lightweight and fast enough for sideline action if you are patient and stick to JPEG. The autofocus does its best but sometimes loses interest mid-chase, and the buffer for raw shots is like your grandma trying to empty her purse really slowly. For casual weekend warriors, it's alright, but pros will probably browse for something faster before halftime. 6 out of 10. Sony A6000. The Sony A6000 is the old but nimble underdog. 11 frames per second means you can catch nearly every sweat bead on a sprinter's brow. Autofocus is snappy, colors are solid, and despite the lack of touchscreen and smaller buffer, this camera will snag awesome action shots once you wrangle the controls. For anyone just getting started with sports photography but not ready to remortgage their house, it's a fun pick that still punches above its weight. 7 out of 10. Panasonic Lumix G9 II. This featherweight powerhouse packs stabilization so wild you could shoot a soccer match, hand-holding a lens longer than a selfie stick at a family reunion. The autofocus clings to speeding athletes like a toddler grabs candy, and you will barely break a sweat as the camera delivers crisp action shots while staying delightfully portable. Sure, it is not the brightest kid in low-light stadiums, but for daylight action, it is a knockout punch. 8 out of 10. Nikon Coolpix P950. Sling this chunky beast over your shoulder and suddenly the referee in the nosebleed seats is just a click away, thanks to a zoom that stretches all the way from wide to "is that Bigfoot?" And if your idea of sports is waiting for track runners to stand still, focusing will keep up, but fast and furious action might leave it gasping for air. The images are fine for bragging rights, but I hope you like chasing sharpness as much as chasing athletes. 5 out of 10. Canon EOS 90D. Canon's enthusiast darling swings into the game with autofocus faster than a sprinter out of the blocks and enough battery life to last longer than the actual sport. It tracks moving players with impressive sharpness, but keep an eye on that buffer. Hold the shutter for too long, and you might just miss the trophy moment. Still, with pro-level burst speed and luscious image quality, this DSLR is ready for the big leagues. 9 out of 10. Fujifilm X-H2s. This little speedster fires off 40 shots per second, tracking moving athletes like a caffeinated hunting dog, thanks to its stacked sensor and autofocus that almost glues itself to your subject. It feels robust and is a joy to use for sports and wildlife, but splurge for those fancy cards or expect your wallet to file a complaint. And, fair warning, the lens options for true pro sports are a bit, well, not Olympic ready. If you want pro action features in a smaller, quirky package and do not mind some fiddling, this Fuji is itching to leap into the scrum. 7 out of 10. Nikon Z8. Shooting 20 crisp photos per second, the Z8 snatches split-second action and nails focus so sharp it could shave a mustache right off. Nikon's 3D tracking and animal eye AF eat up wild games and razor-sharp rugby like a hungry tiger. This is the camera that lured old-school pros out of the trenches, offering the power of Nikon's flagship in a much lighter, easier-to-grab body, with all the sweet new Z lenses at your disposal. For sports, events, and anything moving at warp speed, it is a triple threat. But if you are just chasing your kid around the park, maybe save your money for snacks. 9 out of 10. Sony A9 III. Sony's A9 Mark III practically cheats with a global shutter that stops motion so perfectly it feels like time travel. Think 120 shots per second, autofocus that sticks like duct tape, and action frozen with absolutely zero distortion. It is bold, blazing fast, and highly intelligent, but ask this magic machine for super clean night shots, and you might spot more noise than at a stadium concert, plus your piggy bank will weep. If you absolutely, positively cannot miss a single millisecond of the goal, this is the sports shooter's new unfair advantage. 9 out of 10. Sony A1. This camera is the Usain Bolt of photo gear, firing 50 megapixels at 30 frames per second, like it's trying to break the sound barrier and actually nailing focus on the winning shot instead of your cousin in row 17. The autofocus system has zero chill, grabbing eyes, faces, and whatever wild creature or athlete you throw at it. With a keeper rate so high, it might make pro sports shooters retire early. But before you mortgage your house, the price tag hits you harder than a linebacker, and that not-so-articulating screen still feels stuck in 2008. 9 out of 10. Canon EOS R5 Mark II. Canon's R5 Mark II is like the Swiss Army knife of cameras, 45 megapixels with mind-reading autofocus that locks onto athletes, animals, and even speeding cars, plus eye control. So smart, it sometimes just picks a fight with your own retinas. You get 30 frames per second burst shooting and glorious image stabilization, meaning you can catch every win, every grin, and maybe even your subject blinking. The battery dips faster than a fencer's lunge, but for seriously fast-paced action, this camera is a top-tier contender with no patience for blurry shots. 9 out of 10. Canon EOS R10. The little R10 races ahead with a spry 15 shots per second and an autofocus system that genuinely tracks someone sprinting, as long as there's sunlight and you didn't cheap out on your lens, making it a glorious budget option for new sports snappers. Controls and ergonomics are surprisingly legit, and you can squeeze out great action shots without wishing you'd sold your car for upgrades. Sure, it lacks some beefy pro features and struggles a bit indoors, but for the price, it's the scrappy underdog you actually root for in overtime. 7 out of 10. Nikon Z9. This beast was clearly built to keep up with the fastest players on the field, snapping high-speed shots like it just chugged an energy drink and delivering crystal-clear images, even when you crank the ISO into the wild zone. It's fast, intuitive, and will rarely make you pause or curse, unless you see the price tag or need to lift it after leg day. Basically, if you want pro-level performance with a side of bicep workout, this is your sports buddy. 9 out of 10. Sony A7R V. With autofocus so smart it could probably call the plays itself, this camera crushes portraits and delivers knockout image quality. But when it comes to shooting rapid-fire action, its burst speed sometimes feels like it hit snooze. 10 frames per second is decent, but your rivals might already be celebrating. The gigantic detail makes cropping a dream, but rolling shutter at high speed means you risk having a running back look like Gumby. Epic for creativity and versatility, but for pure sports, it still gets benched sometimes. 7 out of 10. Sony A7 IV. Talk about a crowd pleaser. This camera's autofocus is sticky enough to follow a soccer ball through a tornado, and the burst mode means you will not miss that critical winning goal, all in a body that your wrists can handle for an entire tournament. Its low-light performance is a serious power move for those poorly lit gyms, and while it is not quite as fast as the wildest pro cameras, it is so versatile and easy to use it might just become your new MVP. 8 out of 10. Canon EOS 90D. This camera leaps into action with a burst rate that could shock a cheetah, but just as you feel unstoppable, the buffer taps out early, leaving you gasping for more shots than it delivers. Its autofocus is sticky enough to keep your star athlete in focus, though it can start to sweat when things get frantic. And while battery life goes the distance, you'll wish it charged more like a modern gadget. For the committed sports snapper clinging to the DSLR life, it's a sturdy companion, until the action outpaces the buffer and you're left waving from the sidelines. 7 out of 10. Sony A60. Sony's Speed Demon dishes out 42 megapixels of pure electric magic, firing off 10 frames per second like a caffeinated paparazzo who forgot to blink. The autofocus tracks even your wildest tennis serves, though you might find it occasionally dizzy when the game gets too fast, leaving your hero blurry in 1 or 2 critical frames. Sure, you get breathtaking detail in pro controls, but when there's carnage on the field, you'll want a camera that's more beast, less beauty queen. 8 out of 10. Canon EOS R7. The EOS R7 is basically the Energizer Bunny for sports, spitting out bursts at up to 15 frames a second, locking onto sprinting subjects like a heat-seeking missile, and rarely dropping a shot. The lightweight build lets you dodge angry athletes without tearing a rotator cuff, and the autofocus is eerily good. Your photos show every drop of sweat, every untied shoelace. For color, buffer depth, and sheer reliability at a wallet-friendly price, the R7 is hard to bench, though a pro body still wins in a head-to-head. 9 out of 10. Sony A7R V. This camera's autofocus is so fast and clever it could probably track your cat's zoomies at night. But for wild sports, its burst rate stumbles and makes you wish you'd chosen a sprinter instead of a marathon runner. With gorgeous files and juicy colors, you get big detail, but those high-speed moments are more like politely tapping the brakes than going full throttle. Still, if you want smart tracking and aren't shooting the Olympics, you're walking away with a pretty sweet catch. 7 out of 10. Panasonic Sonori. The S1R II is like that reliable midfielder who's got more resolution than you ever asked for, and autofocus that mostly keeps up until someone starts zigzagging across the pitch. Then it might just fumble the ball a little. For sports that move in actual straight lines or anything at reasonable speed, the camera's tracking feels solid. But when chaos breaks out, it wishes it was wearing running shoes from Sony or Canon. Sharp shots, great value, but a little too chill for hardcore sports fans. 6 out of 10. Fujifilm GFX 100S2. If your dream is to catch every blotch of mud on a rugby player's socks, this 102 megapixel monster will deliver, and every pore along with it. But its medium format pedigree means speed and portability are more like cross-country on stilts. The autofocus is much improved, and it tracks movement better than you'd expect for its size. But if your sport looks like a pinball game, you might as well bring a sandwich. Unmatched image detail, but let's be real, you're not chasing sprinters with this beast. 5 out of 10. Nikon D780. The Nikon D780 is like the seasoned athlete who not only makes every shot look easy, but also refuses to get tired, even after you've hit the shutter like a trigger-happy sports fan at a playoff game. Its autofocus system is faster than your average sprinter. Focus tracking locks onto action with the confidence of a referee with laser vision, and the camera body feels so sturdy, you could probably use it to block a penalty box rush. Plus, you get battery life that could outlast overtime. If you want sharp, action-packed shots without switching to a mirrorless camera and losing your precious F-mount lenses, this all-rounder is ready to sprint and dunk. 9 out of 10. Nikon Z7. The Nikon Z7 comes in like the flashy rookie, packed with megapixels and edge-to-edge sharpness, but just as likely to miss a slam dunk when the action gets wild, thanks to autofocus tracking that can drop the ball faster than a butterfingered point guard shooting basketball or soccer. You'll capture gorgeous details and emotions, but keep your expectations in the good enough camp for chasing athletes. Its autofocus is more ballet than breakaway. It's a stunner for portraits, landscape, and weekend warriors, but hardcore sports fans might want to draft a faster player to their team. 6 out of 10. Pentax K1. The Pentax K1 wants to play, but it's built more for scenic marathons than 100-meter sprints, with top-notch image quality and dynamic range, but a continuous burst mode that feels more like a leisurely jog. Its autofocus is dependable, if you are patient, but the K1 just cannot hustle with the big dogs when the action's fast, so dedicated sports shooters might find themselves stuck on the sidelines. For capturing grand stadiums or epic landscapes, it shines, but for high-speed moments, you should probably bench it. 4 out of 10. Fuji X-S20. This camera zips along with fast autofocus and more modes than a Swiss Army knife, so your football shots won't get stuck in the penalty box. But it's not weather-sealed, so the rain will send it running for shelter faster than a soggy hot dog at a ball game. For sports, it's good, but not a true MVP, especially when the buffer fills up in RAW and the viewfinder feels a bit squinty. So call it the reliable backup player who occasionally forgets its cleats. 7 out of 10. Sony A6700. Sporting AI-powered autofocus that sticks to athletes like superglue, and a burst rate that can keep up with game-changing moments. The A6700 brings serious hustle to the field. If you like your camera silent, great. Unless you switch to the electronic shutter and catch more rolling shutter than a roller derby, making speedy shots a little artistic, it handles action impressively for the price, but the viewfinder is tiny, and it sometimes overheats faster than you after scarfing spicy nachos, benchwarmer risk in longer games. 7 out of 10. Nikon D850. This beast sounds off like the stadium crowd, serving up autofocus that nails even splashy swims and sprint finishes at 7 frames per second, while its high ISO keeps your late-night soccer shots crisp and drama-free. The huge 45.7 megapixel files will make your editors cheer, and with weather sealing, it shrugs off a bit of rain or sweat like a true champ. Sure, it's heavy, but on the sidelines, it's the all-star you want. Unless you're hoping for a light camera bag, then maybe just skip the gym today. 9 out of 10. Nikon Z5. The Nikon Z5 wants to join the sports photography party with its full-frame sensor and sharp image quality, but it crashes the action with a sluggish burst rate that moves like molasses during the big game. Its autofocus tends to flinch just when you need to lock onto flying feet or furious fists. So get ready for plenty of blurry memories unless you photograph turtles. For anyone obsessed with freezing split-second sports drama, you will want to bench the Z5 and call in one of the true speedsters instead. 3 out of 10.